Hello. At the moment, there is an unprecedented amount of Palestine related litigation underway across the civil and criminal courts of different countries and also before international courts and tribunals. In July 2024 and in October 2025, the International Court of Justice issued vital advisory opinions on Palestine, outlining Israeli violations of international law, affirming Palestinian rights. The court in 2024 issued three sets of provisional measures, orders under the Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. It's the ongoing case of South Africa against Israel. Also underway at the court is Nicaragua's legal challenge against Germany for the latter's support to Israel. November 2024 saw the issuance of arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister and then Foreign Minister by the International Criminal Court. But to start with, national litigation, so legal proceedings drawing on international law underway in the courts of individual countries. Strongly informed by the various decisions of the International Court of Justice and in response to Israel's escalation of genocide in Palestine, the past 2 years have seen a wide range of efforts taken by advocacy groups by way of litigation before national courts. In the UK, for example, Al-Haq has been involved in litigation challenging the British government's continued licensing of weapons exports to Israel, with similar challenges having been taken in Denmark, the Netherlands, and Germany. In France, legal action has been taken seeking to prevent Israeli weapons companies from participating at arms fairs. In Ireland, legal action is underway challenging the refusal of Irish police to investigate Airbnb Ireland and its senior executives for alleged criminal involvement in Israeli settlements. Also in Ireland, proceedings were taken challenging the Irish Central Bank's facilitation of Israel bonds. With respect to individual criminal responsibility, war crimes charges against Israeli European dual nationals have been initiated in France and in Italy, in Greece and in Germany. At the international level, the issuance of arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant at the International Criminal Court was a remarkable development, but one which reveals a fragile institution. Now, during 2023 and 2024, some 7 member states of the Rome Statute submitted referrals to the court demanding accountability for Israel's conduct in Gaza. The issuance by the court of arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity in November of last year was a momentous development long campaigned for. The arrest warrants issued are directly connected to Israel's conduct post October the 7th in Gaza. While this is of course necessary, the court's focus should not exclude the need to address the structural criminality of the overall occupation, and specifically settlement crimes and apartheid. Reaction to the ICC arrest warrants was initially quite problematic. Key European states undermining the independence of the judiciary when suggesting that Netanyahu, as Prime Minister, was immune from prosecution on account of his status as a head of state. This was particularly problematic given ongoing US sanctions against the staff, the prosecutors, the judges at the International Criminal Court. So partly in response to such attacks on the court, in April 2025, the court decided that applications for arrest warrants in the situation in Palestine were not to be made public. So essentially, we're at a point where the existing arrest warrants have yet to be enforced, and we do not know whether additional charges have been laid or whether additional arrest warrants have been requested or issued. There's been a significant amount of activity at the International Court of Justice. One of the court's functions is to issue advisory opinions, which are authoritative interpretations of the binding international law on states. In 2004, the court had issued an advisory opinion affirming the illegality of Israel's settlements and the annexation wall in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. In July 2024, the court issued an advisory opinion which focused on the occupation itself on the whole, which concluded that the occupation is indeed unlawful, that Israel is in violation of the prohibition of racial discrimination and apartheid. And the court emphasised the obligations on third states to not aid or assist the unlawful occupation in any way. In September of 2024, the UN General Assembly, by resolution, endorsed the court's conclusions and spelled out with greater specificity the steps which third states are to take in order to give effect to the advisory opinion. At the core of the court's findings was the clear affirmation that Israel's presence in the OPT is unlawful, that all states are under the legal obligation not to aid or assist in the maintenance of Israel's illegal presence in the OPT, and that states are obliged to work together to bring the unlawful presence to an end. In essence, the court requires a comprehensive restriction on all economic, trade, military, diplomatic and cultural engagement with Israel, with the Israeli state. So the 2024 advisory opinion has been of vital importance in informing litigation at the national level in particular. It was recently followed up in an advisory opinion from 2025, which affirmed that Israel has no legal authority to restrict United Nations access to the OPT. That advisory opinion was narrowly focused on UNRWA in particular, but reaffirmed the principle that as Israel's presence in the OPT is unlawful, Israel has no authority, legal authority, to prevent any access to the OPT by external actors. That right remains vested in the Palestinian people by way of their collective right to self-determination. In the proceedings around the 2024 and the 2025 advisory opinion, a wide range of states provided legal opinions to the court. Overall, these legal submissions have been strongly supportive of Palestinian rights and have predominantly rejected Israel's various policies and practices as unlawful. States have likewise, in less numbers, but states have made interventions to the court supporting South Africa's genocide case against Israel. Now, in these proceedings in 2024, the court determined that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza, but the legal process around these proceedings is extremely slow. While the court did issue 3 sets of provisional measures ordering Israel to cease its unlawful conduct, these have been ignored. There is this contradiction then, where many states, including European states, have, in the Israel genocide case and advisory opinions, moved to formally explain their condemnations of Israel and support for Palestine through legal initiatives, but remain unwilling or unable to turn such language into meaningful enforcement action. The other main case ongoing at the International Court of Justice is that of Nicaragua against Germany, where Nicaragua argues that by providing political, financial and military support to Israel, Germany is facilitating the commission of genocide and has failed its obligation to do everything possible to prevent the commission of genocide. Again, while critically important, the legal process here is very time-consuming, but the fact that the case exists at all is contributing to the development of legal strategies to force political action. An important initiative to note in this regard in enforcing compliance and political action is the Hague Group Initiative, led by Colombia, South Africa, Bolivia, Cuba, Honduras, Malaysia, Namibia and Senegal. States which have convened and committed to coordinated legal and diplomatic measures in defence of international law and solidarity with the people of Palestine. This is a global South-led initiative to see the enforcement of international law, but the Hague Group has seen several European states, including Ireland, Norway, Portugal, Slovenia and Spain, attend its conferences. So these are countries that are showing sympathy with the initiative without formally adhering to its commitments. In summary, just prior to 2024 UN General Assembly resolution endorsing the advisory opinion of the ICJ, UN experts warned that despite these adamant directions, states remain paralysed in the face of the seismic shift represented by the court's ruling and appear unwilling or unable to take necessary steps to meet their obligations. So while states increasingly declare their recognition and legal affirmation of Palestinian rights, and the endorsement of the law by so many states is welcome, without active enforcement, such legal initiatives will remain but a historical record of the failure of the international community of states. unfolding plans for external forces to take control of Gaza based on plans published during 2020 by the first Trump administration, threatened to expunge Palestinian claims under international law and to abolish potential accountability for Israel's conduct. It is imperative then that in addition to legal advocacy at the international level, that litigation in national courts across many states based on the conclusions of the International Court of Justice are continued in order to seek to ensure that individual states begin to meaningfully respect their legal obligations to ensure the realization of the Palestinian right to self-determination. Thank you.